What's going on? It's Jack and JD. We're back for another edition of Talking Ball, looking at the Duke versus Louisville game, the first conference game of the season, a road test for the Dukies, the second of the year. Coming off of the big Auburn win, there's certainly, the element of a little bit of a letdown coming into this game.
On the road.
On the road, it's going to be a tough environment. We've been actually to the Yum Center. It's a great environment. The team is better this year than it has been the previous couple years, but at the same time, they have picked up a few injuries of late. What, just from surface level, what are some things you're looking forward to with this game?
So probably the first thing is there a letdown after that Auburn win? That game was just incredibly exciting. It was a great win for Duke. So that's the first thing. The second thing is probably, what do they do with Isaiah Evans? What do you do with a guy that gets 6 3-pointers and a half? How do you work him into the rotation? And you and I have been begging for this. They did it. It proved to work. So what are they going to do there? And, who's he going to put for the starting five? Because by having Sion James starting, Caleb Foster coming off the bench had a really good game. So those are a couple of things I'm looking at.
Absolutely. And I think Isaiah Evans is a good place to start for sure, just because everyone was calling for, where's Isaiah Evans? Even non-Duke fans were like, what's going on? Why isn't this guy playing? He was the 15th ranked recruit. He hasn't played any of the big games. He gets his shot, and it was just way beyond what anybody could have thought he could do, considering the circumstances. He just hadn't played. I wrote it down. He's averaging right now 12.2 minutes and 9.4 points. It's crazy. It's crazy. So, yeah, it's just, to me, the question is, how many minutes does he get? Because I don't think there should be any question of if he plays at this point. I think that would be kind of crazy if he doesn't play. And when do those minutes come? Like, how early into the game do they try to insert him into the lineup for this matchup against a Louisville team, which is good and not as far off from a Duke team that people would think, but again, has had a few injuries in their most recent handful of games that have certainly impacted the rotation for Louisville.
Well, let me just go back to Isaiah Evans. So one of the good things about having the old guy here, Vinnie Johnson, who used to play in the NBA, his nickname was the Microwave. And Isaiah Evans could take a claim to the Microwave. It's a great nickname. It was his job as the sixth man to come in. I think it was Seattle that he played for, and he just was instant offense. And, it's just a great comparison. I also...
For the younger audience, or maybe slightly younger, in fairness, because I'm not as young as a lot of our viewers, I would compare him to like late stage career J.R. Smith in the same sense. Same sense. Instant offense, threes. And my favorite part from listening to the podcast of Isaiah Evans was he described that first shot of the game, which I thought was a tough shot that he hit when he curled around and the defender was there. He described it as, yeah, it was kind of a difficult shot. And then he went on to say, and after I hit that, I felt pretty good that it was going to be a good night. So just in the sense that when he sees, he's one of those guys who when he sees one shot go down, he thinks, oh, it's my night. And honestly, I think if he misses the first handful of shots, he still thinks it's his night, which is my favorite part about Isaiah Evans.
Well, and let's face it, Isaiah Evans doesn't go on that run, I'm not certain we win that game. It was a momentum changer, It gave Duke the confidence that they could play with Auburn. And even with his 18-point first half performance, it was a tight game in the second half.
Very tight game. Very tight game. And as you just said, that was the difference in the game. Because I agree. It's just hard to imagine how they were going to come back in that game or be in that game without that performance. So he was critical.
So what am I looking for? I don't know that he can do that every game. Hopefully, he can get a chance to get his 5 or 6 shots for 3-pointers, and hopefully, he can be one of these guys that has a high percentage and he can hit 3 of 6. And that would be a wonderful thing to be looking for from Isaiah Evans. It is, but let's assume that's not the case. So we're back to, is it Proctor's night? Is it K2's night? We're going to give some love to Caleb Foster. We did love his aggression to the basket and, a nice jump shot. Let's see, we've got to, K2 has got to come alive. He's too good an offensive player, and we're going to need him if we're going to go on a deep run. So the question is, how does he fit in, and how does he find his open shot? He's got a great 3-pointer.
He does. And to your last point, one of the things I had said in our post game was, is it the athleticism that other teams have, or is Duke not doing a great job of getting him open? And it's probably a combination of both that K2 is struggling a bit with. He's not the best athlete. We did see, though, in I think it was the exhibition game, the dunk he had. So he is athletic. It's just not maybe at the same level as some other guys. He's not at the foot quickness more than anything, which is why I think in part Evans was a little bit more able to get open in the game versus Auburn. Auburn, though, is certainly a better defense, and so is Kansas, and so is Kentucky. Just looking at the metrics on KenPom than a Louisville. Louisville's not a bad defense, but those other 3 schools are in the top 30, somewhere in that range. Louisville's somewhere in, I think, like 50 to 75 on KenPom defensively. So I think there could be more openings for Khan to get, better shots in this game. And you're right. The team has got to get him going. He doesn't look. I think it's safe to say at this point, the prediction that at least I had a couple of weeks ago that Khan would lead us in scoring doesn't look so good. I think that is.
I was with you. I said this guy could be, just incredible. But Jack, you know how they used to say that, by March Madness, freshmen aren't freshmen anymore. It could be that he is just a freshman and is learning how to play at another level, and he hasn't figured it out yet. The guy's got mad shooting skills, big body.
And he's smart.
And he's smart, and he sees the court well.
Yep.
He may not have just figured it out yet. It's early. He had very, very difficult tests. Like if the teacher was giving you your tests, these were not midterms. These were final exams, and he got them really quickly. And so it may be that we're going to have to be a little patient with K2.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say I think he could settle in as a 12 point per game guy, but as the year goes on, maybe to your point, he has some outbursts of 20 plus points in some key moments for this Duke team as he gets adjusted to Division I basketball, which to your point is a big adjustment, and it wasn't a slow run. It went from exhibition games, Army, Maine, to Kentucky, Arizona, Kansas, and then Auburn. And the one thing I will say, looking back on it, is you can see that Khan made adjustments. It may not have led to big, production, but the first game with Kentucky, he really struggled. he looked a little bit apprehensive. He just never found a flow. The second big game, Arizona, he did hit some big shots late. Kansas, he struggled shooting again, but he did have 8 assists, which really kept Duke in that game. Obviously along with Malik Brown, who was awesome. And that's kind of been a theme of the season. And then in this game with Auburn, he wasn't really involved on either side of the ball. But he didn't shoot the team. He didn't go, shoot 8 or 9 threes in a game where he didn't feel comfortable. And I think that allowed for some other guys to have big performances. So I do think he made adjustments.
To your point, he didn't hurt us. But as opposed to being a freshman, Jack, take us through the Louisville team, because this team, I think, averages 5 years in college or something. It's unbelievable what Coach Pat Kelsey brought in, and just in terms of their experience.
Yeah, and speaking of that, let's spend about 10 minutes here on Louisville strictly. So as we evaluate Louisville's team, Coach Pat Kelsey, I think, did an awesome job. Just bringing in transfers, recruiting. He brought in basically an entirely new roster, and that's exactly what was needed. This Louisville team has been in a rough spot, to say the least, the past couple of years. And college basketball is in a better place when Louisville's good. It makes the Louisville-Kentucky games better. It's just much more fun when Louisville is a good team. And in the past, there's been some great Duke-Louisville games, both in Cameron and at Louisville as well. So I think he did a great job of just recruiting, getting a bunch of transfers. As you said, a lot of older guys, some younger guys that he brought over as either freshmen or as transfers from that came with him from the College of Charleston. But I think quickly, before we get into the guys who are playing, I want to quickly go through some of the guys who aren't going to play, because I think that is a important factor of this game.
Oh, you had brought up injuries or other things that they're experiencing, so yes.
So, Kason Pryor, who was their third leading scorer, he's out for the season. A couple of games ago, tore his ACL. Corin Johnson was a pretty good guard. Didn't get to play a ton for Louisville, but he's out for the season, apparently a shoulder injury. Then this happened before the season. I think this was announced back in April. I did a preview video on Louisville. I missed this, but one of the comments let me know. Ali Khalifa, he's redshirting this season, so they don't have depth at the center position, which is part of the reason the Pryor injury is so big, because he's not really a center, but he is 6'10", 6'11". Kobe Rogers is one of the guys who transferred with, well, I guess not transferred with, but came over from College of Charleston. He's redshirting. And then Abubakar Traore is injured. I don't know exactly when he's coming back, but I don't believe he'll be available for this game. So that's five scholarship players that are not available for this game for Louisville, and that's a big deal. It's a big deal, especially because I had thought this Louisville team could end up being, a bottom half, 20, 25, maybe fringe top 25 team. And it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get there. But with the guys who are playing, let's go through that. So one of my favorite guards in college basketball is Chucky Hepburn. Transferred over from Wisconsin. For Duke fans, think of, if you haven't seen him play, he is as disruptive, let's just say he's as disruptive from the point guard position defensively as Malik Brown. He is averaging 3.5 steals per game. It is crazy. He just gets a ton of deflections. He's everywhere defensively, and then offensively he can get downhill, a straight line driver, and can shoot the three. Not a great shooter, but certainly an above average shooter. They do have one guy though who is a great shooter, and that's Rain Smith. And here's a crazy stat on Rain Smith. In his college career, he shot like 87% of his attempts, just overall field goal attempts, from three.
I got a crazier stat.
Okay.
Who was his high school backcourt mate?
No idea.
He's playing in the game. Therese Proctor.
He's
He's,
Australian?
from, he's Australian.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's cool.
And they're like the first time they're going to be playing against each other in a game, and they were high school teammates in Australia.
That is a crazier stat. That's a good one. That's a good one. And so
All right.
I was just gonna say that this year he's actually shooting even a higher percentage of his field goal attempts from three. He's shooting nine. He's like at 9.9 field goal attempts, and 9 of those are threes, and he's shooting 39%. It's insane. So in terms of guys that Duke has to key on defensively, he's number one. Chucky Hepburn
Well,
stirs the drink, if you will, but Rain Smith is the guy who, if he goes off, it's going to be a very different game.
okay.
Then
What else you got?
Yeah, another guy who I really like is Javon Hadley. Not a great shooter. Came over from Colorado where he was a starter on a team. I think they made it. No, they were just shy of the Sweet 16. But they were a really good team last year. He's like an undersized forward. He leads them in rebounding. He's a good defender. He's a smart player. Really important for them. Then the two guys who round it. Go ahead.
Time out. A little more background, a little Duke connection there with Javon.
Sure.
Player that he would most like to meet in the NBA, Kyrie Irving, but the player he most admires, Jason Tatum.
Interesting. Two Dukies. He also
Dookies.
started his career at Northeastern, which is where I went to school, so that's pretty cool for me.
Sure.
Then they have their two other starters from the last game. Coach Kelsey has mixed and matched his starting lineup, and we'll get into all the guys who I think could play in this game. But the two other starters, Terrence Edwards and Noah Waterman, have been struggling this year in different ways. Edwards,
Noah Waterman, a sixth-year player.
Yeah, he's been around. He's from upstate New York, but really upstate New York. He's in his fourth school, I believe, as well. So he's it's the new age of college basketball. Thankfully, next year, maybe not so thankfully, because Duke has benefited from this, but the COVID year will be done. So I think that will, at least there won't be too many more sixth-year guys. Let's just say that. All right, Edwards. So last year, Duke fans should remember him a little bit. He was the leading scorer, best player on the James Madison Dukes. This year, he struggled to adjust. It's hard to say whether it's adjusting to the role or the level of competition. I would think more so the role, because at James Madison, he's the guy. He's not the guy anymore. So you've got to figure out where your spots are, and he hasn't figured it out yet. I think he's a good player, and for all we know, this could be the game he figures it out, because that tends to happen a lot with Duke. And Noah Waterman, similarly, as you alluded to, he's been around. He is shooting 24% from three this year. He's a career 37% shooter. I expect him to be due. I think he'll hit 3 or 4 threes, which brings me to... Oh, before I get to... I have a stat on three-point shooting. Don't let me forget as I round out the rotation here. So James Scott, one of the younger players I alluded to, came over with Coach Kelsey from the College of Charleston. He is a center. He's a classic rim-running, shot-blocking center. He really only shoots layups or dunks, but he knows his role, and he's pretty good at it. And then Connie Roots has been a part of the rotation the past couple games, more so because of injuries to guys like Pryor. And he's actually a freshman, which is kind of crazy. And he's a decent player. He was just ranked inside the top 100. He's still kind of figuring things out, though, I would say. And then lastly, Frank Anselm eBay got a couple of minutes. He's at the fringe of the rotation. They played 7 last game. eBay got a couple of minutes. So he's just another guy. Just keep on your radar for you Duke fans.
So, looking at the team and their trajectory in some of their key games, they have an overall record of 5-3. Um, they were crushed by Tennessee early on by 22 points. They had a great win against Indiana, where they won by 28. They beat West Virginia in overtime to win the battle for Atlantis. So the two games they won there, they loved Atlantis, and then they came home. And they lost to Oklahoma by 5 points, and then they were crushed by Mississippi by 23 points. So since they should have stayed in Atlantis, they were very happy there. And I think Chucky Hepburn said that's his favorite place to go vacation. So maybe they should have just stayed there.
He was awesome in Atlanta, so I
Yes.
get why he said that. I get it.
Do you know he had in the West Virginia game, he had 32 points, but 14 of 17 from the free throw line that game, which was just an awesome stat since I love free throw shooting. And obviously he paid attention to that. So my point is that a great holiday season at Atlantis, came home, had 2 losses. They are going to be up for taking down Duke, as every team is, especially after Duke just beat Auburn. So and we're in the Yum Center, as you said. Duke fans do not take this game lightly.
No, I think this is going to be a really tough game for Duke. And the 3-point stat I wanted to make sure I got in this video is Louisville, 8th in the country in 3-point attempts. They are currently 349th. I think there's like 360 something schools in percentage. Something has got to give with that. And I think they'll hit a few more in this game, but at the same time, outside of Rain Smith and Hepburn, I guess Waterman's the other guy, because I think he could get his. But the other guys on the team, like Javon Hadley, Edwards, they're just not high volume shooters in the past, so I don't expect that to necessarily change too much. But I do think Waterman and Rain Smith are going to combine for 7 or 8 threes in this game against Duke. And lastly, just a fun statistic, because I keep mentioning it the past few videos. Duke's opponents have shot 80% from the free throw line. I think it ranks like 360th. So there's only 366 or 367 schools. Their opponents are shooting crazy percentage from the free throw line. I expect that to continue in this game. I think Louisville will, as you just said, Hepburn was money from the free throw line. They'll shoot 85% as a team in this game.
Well, especially playing a home game, in which case it's time for me to come down on the 6th man, the Cameron Crazies. If you're allowing the defense to shoot 80% from the free throw line, you guys, come on. You're underneath the basket. You're trying to create distractions. We need a little help there.
Yeah.
That is clearly one. The second thing I want to ask you, though, is if they have this potential to have a good percentage from 3, does Shire take a very good defensive team and have them come further out on defense, picking up the man from 3-point range? What's the best strategy to guard against this, Jack?
Yeah, so that's the conundrum in this game, because if you play too far out, it does open up the door for backdoor cuts, which guys like Edwards and Hadley can take advantage of. I think this game is going to be more conducive for Malik Brown versus Malawach because of Malik Brown's ability to switch. And I think the way Duke has defended this year, they like to switch. And he will be able to stay on smaller players. He can guard anybody as far as I'm concerned. And so I think that makes sense defensively. At the same time, Malawach could be a big offensive weapon in this game because I don't think the only guy who really could match up with him is James Scott, and he's even given up a few inches and some pounds as well. So I think there's a little bit of a pros and cons that Coach Shire will have to evaluate in game as to who he prefers between Malawach and Brown in this matchup, because as you alluded to, it's going to be important for Duke to stay up at the 3-point line, especially with Rain Smith. And I wouldn't be surprised. It's funny you brought it up before. I didn't know that him and Proctor played together and are from Australia. I would think, based off of how Duke has used Proctor defensively, that he will be either on Rain Smith or Chucky Hepburn. And I wouldn't surprise me if he's on Rain Smith.
If there another possibility that you could use against a very good 3-point shooting team. I know I came up with this crazy idea for how to use the starting lineup last game, and some of it wasn't due to me, but some of it came out, and Coach Shire deserves a lot of credit there. There is a way to play a defensive zone, a 3-1-1. And I don't expect Duke to go into a zone, but what you do is you put 3 guys on top in order to take care of the 3-point shooting. You put Malik Brown in the middle because his deflection ability is so good, and then you put Mal behind him. And so that can protect the rim. And that's to me how you could balance against 3-point shooting, because Malik Brown could definitely play the middle and quickly get here and there, and Mal could protect the rim in case they're getting in. So that's just my crazy defensive idea for this one.
That's fair. I think that I don't think Coach Shire will go to that lineup very much. He didn't use it against Auburn, which is what I thought he might. And to me, I don't think it makes sense to use it against Louisville because it hurts you offensively to have Mal and Brown in the game together. And I don't think it's necessary defensively. I think between guys like Cooper Flagg and Sion James and Proctor that they could move around and cover. And I think just going back to, you talked about the Louisville game versus Tennessee, where Tennessee was able to win by 20-plus points, I believe. And then their most recent loss to Ole Miss. And those are 2 important games to bring up because there's some things that Duke can take from those games, and there's some things that Duke really can't. So the Tennessee game, I think, is the better example because, as you've said a week or 2 ago, Duke this year kind of has the feel of a Houston or an Iowa State. And that's borne out because as of right now on KenPom, Duke is the number 1 ranked defense. And who's
in the country?
In the country. Who's number 2?
Wow.
Tennessee. Tennessee gave Louisville a lot of trouble with their defense, their physicality. I do think Duke can do something similar. Now, on the flip side, the Ole Miss game, which was Louisville's most recent opponent, they were able to get into the paint at will against Louisville. I don't think Duke is going to be able to do that. The reason is it's personnel. A lot of the reason Ole Miss was able to get into the paint is they play a lot of small guards who are quick and able to, like Sean Padula, Jalen Murray, they're able to penetrate and get into the paint and just force defensive rotations. Duke really just doesn't have anybody like that. The best guy is probably Caleb Foster. And outside of him, no one else is really great at penetrating in, besides Cooper, I would say. But he does it in a different way. So that is something to be mindful of in this game, that it's, I think, offensively for Duke, going to have to use our size. And Cooper has shown an ability to do that. And I really like when he's able to get downhill and score close to the basket using his touch around the basket versus sometimes he'll like settle for a mid-range shot. And I think he's better if he can get more into that close range.
I think I think it's actually, as a fan, very exciting when he attempts to do that. We've actually seen him do that and stuff the ball in, where he leaped over a player in order to get it in as a dunk. And I think that he could do that driving to the basket. But let's take the lesson from last game. How many turnovers, Jack?
4.
Four as a team, and how many turnovers for Coop?
0.
Zero. So we don't want him reverting back to the basket spinning. He kind of has got that, and a lot of his post game comments were about exercising the demons of the Kentucky turnovers, and that he was very proud of himself to figure out how to maintain the ball down the stretch. So whatever he did mentally to make that adjustment and put himself back in contention as the top player in the country, even though he was playing against John A. Broome.
It is funny because Janai Broome's like 5 years older than him. Like it's and then to your point, like listening to his post game, he's like he's a little bit crazy in the sense that he was saying, like, in the best way possible. He was like, yeah, I just kept thinking of those turnovers. I just kept thinking about them. Like, they're like, I'm paraphrasing, but they're like eating away at him. And you could tell it bothered him to his core. Like, as much as like us fans, it may have bothered us, whatever, it bothered him way more than anyone else, which is exactly what you want from somebody who is the best player on the team and likely to be at least a top 3 NBA pick, this coming June. So he's awesome. His mentality, that's really the word I would use from that post-game press conference. He's just going to keep attacking, and whenever and the other thing from Coach Shire is he said he's a one-time guy, meaning that it takes him, I guess in this instance it was, in fairness, maybe 2 times, but he goes through something once, he may fail, he may struggle, but the next time he makes the adjustment. And boy, have we seen that with Cooper Flack.
I think it'll be very, very interesting among so is there a letdown? After this game, kind of hard not to be, especially going on the road. What do they do with Isaiah Evans? What happens to the starting 5, like Caleb Foster off the bench? And, it's a true road game in an arena that is tough environment. As you said, we were there for that great rivalry match of, Kentucky and Louisville, which is just an incredible thing. And it's nice to see the effort to revive it. When I was doing some research on the players, there are players that specifically went there to revive the culture of Louisville, and they want to be part of it. And let's focus a little bit on Pat Kelsey as coach. In 2024, he's brand new. His contract was given to him March 28th, 2024. I suspect when Louisville didn't make the March Madness, they were looking for a new coach. And he came from the College of Charleston, as you said, and I think it was 2 years in a row at the College of Charleston that he made March Madness.
He's won everywhere he's been.
And so this is the guy that can help revive that. And I think the goal of the players and the coach, minimum goal there, is to be good enough to make the cut for March Madness. And this is one of those high quality wins that will stay with them forever, regardless of their performance in the ACC. Not totally regardless. I mean, if they can't win a game, they're not going to make the thing. But this is a big win for them if they're going to give this their all in order to try to have this in their resume.
Yeah. Speaking on that, that's kind of how it is with every Duke game. But
And
this year, especially in conference play, with the lack of, I mean, listen, we just saw what happened in the ACC SEC challenge. There are not a lot of high quality opportunities for teams in the ACC outside of Duke and maybe North Carolina. They are 4-4 to start the year. They will get better, but in terms of those premier like high quality win opportunities, there's just an even there's yes, everyone plays their best against Duke, but now there's an even extra like incentive on top of that. And you're looking at a Louisville team coming off of 2 losses, playing at home. This is the first conference game. Like, there's just a lot of things that, you know, are lining up for Louisville to have a big performance, and it's going to be a tough game for Duke. And the other thing I want to go back to is you brought up the turnovers. I fully expect us to have 10 turnovers in this game because it's a road environment. It's the first conference game. And then the question is, how do we manage it? And that's what we'll have to see in this game on Sunday. I think it's 6 p.m.
6 p.m. on Sunday. So yeah, I'll close out with one bizarre Pat Kelsey. So his first assistant coaching job was in the ACC at Wake Forest. And in that year, there was a certain point guard for Wake Forest, Chris Paul. And that was his first time coaching. In his bio, they give him a lot of credit for coaching Chris Paul, but I don't think he was the guy that led Chris Paul to the career that he had. But that tells you a lot about Pat Kelsey and his relationship to the ACC. So he's not a total stranger, even though College of Charleston and then Winthrop, I think, is where he spent many years. So, but he's a fine coach. Good catch by Louisville.
Yeah, I agree. I think even, like, unfortunately, they've picked up a few injuries here, but I think they've got their guy. That'd be my assessment. I know it's early, but it seems like they got their guy for the foreseeable future, and I think this is going to be a really good game. Duke versus Louisville, first conference game of the year. I'm excited. And with that, we'll wrap us up here. So if you're new to the channel, subscribe. We'll cover every Duke game throughout the year, plus a few other videos mixed in here and there. Like this video, helps us with the algorithm. Share it with a friend. Let us know your thoughts below in the comments, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Peace.